It seems yet another Disney princess won't be seeing her happily ever after in live action, all because of the disaster that was Snow White. Hey y'all, SnarkyJay cosplay here. So just this past week, it was announced that the live-action remake of the hit animated Disney film Tangled, which is all about Rapunzel, was actually being shelved. I had forgotten that they were working on this one, probably because of the constant barrage of live-action remakes. Tangled was apparently really close to being next on the slate, to the point that they had actually already gone through auditions and such to prepare for the movie. But as of right now, the film has essentially been shelved indefinitely. It technically hasn't been canceled, but I think most of us on this channel know that when things get shelved or delayed indefinitely, it essentially means they're never going to see the light of day, unless they happen to be the Crow reboot, and then we end up having to suffer through that. Now, interestingly enough, the news of this indefinite hold comes really shortly after the tremendous flop that has been Snow White. So let's break this down a little bit. Tangled, the Rapunzel movie, came out in 2010, and it's probably one of the more beloved of the recent Disney princess movies, even though it didn't make the billions that Frozen made in 2013. Tangled made $591 million at the box office against a budget of $260 million, which actually ended up making it one of the most expensive animated films ever made. That's probably due to how many times the story got worked over and how many times the animation had to be redone, but that's neither here nor there. The point is that the movie was much beloved. A lot of people found a newfound adoration for Rapunzel and of course Flynn Rider, to the point that Tangled is so recognized as a beloved Disney property that if you go to the Magic Kingdom in Orlando, Florida, they have an entire bathroom themed after Tangled, which I think is admittedly hilarious for how much hype the film got. I have no problem with it, I just had to mention that. Anyway, my point is, the movie was a huge deal in 2010. It made great money, and being that I was a 10-year-old girl in 2010, I remember the film being quite popular among my friends. Tangled is one of those oddly relatable princess stories that makes it so perfect for a live-action remake, at least in the eyes of Disney. If you can modernize a story enough, that makes it the perfect candidate for the live-action remake treatment. Now, of course, that didn't stop them from making our favorite film of the year so far, Snow White 2025. And it seems like that film is essentially teaching Disney all the stories, all the moral lessons that they've been needing to learn for the last 8 or so years. Some things don't need live action remakes, and some things especially don't need girl boss versions of live action remakes, because that's essentially what they did with Snow White. And in case you haven't been keeping up with the box office numbers for that one, as of the time of this video's recording on April 8th, just 3 weeks after its release, it's now at about $168 million worldwide, which essentially puts it at about half of its production budget. That's not even counting all the money they had to spend on marketing this thing. So Disney is losing big with Snow White. And of course, there are always films that don't do fantastically in theaters, but really pick up in streaming. The latest live-action Lion King Mufasa movie is one of those that really picked up when it went to streaming. But unfortunately, they need those box office dollars, and Snow White just isn't cutting it. And of course, we could look at these Disney live-action remakes and say, well, one big flop doesn't mean the rest of them are flops. After all, I quite literally just made a chart in one of my last videos all about how well some of these have done. I mean, some of these live-action remakes have literally brought in billions, like Beauty and the Beast and the first Lion King live-action movies. But when you look at these last couple of failures, the fact that Mufasa didn't really open with a lot of money, the fact that The Little Mermaid lost $5 million, the fact that Snow White has fallen apart at the box office, it really brings up a red flag that they decided to just shelve Rapunzel, or Tangled rather. And you kind of have to ask yourself why that is. To be quite frank, as much as people have tried to say that Snow White failed because it was too woke, I think parents with children don't give a shit about woke, and little kids aren't gonna go, that seems like a girl boss movie. I will not have it. Please bring me the next apple juice in a sippy cup. Kids don't give a shit They just see Disney princess and they want to go. The problem with the live action Snow White was not because of the girl boss thing or because Rachel Zegler wouldn't keep her mouth shut. It was because the movie looked bad. And to be quite honest, Disney is a brand built on spectacle. Disney is a brand that requires that Disney magic. That's why people go to the parks. That's why people watch the movies, both animated and live action, because you know when it's branded Disney, it's supposed to have sparkles and a castle and all that shit. And when you looked at any part of Snow White, even in the ads, it didn't look like that. And so naturally, it didn't make the money it needed to make because it didn't live up to the Disney standard. And it was never meant to live up to the Disney standard because the Disney standard used to be flights of fancy and fantasy and escape into another world, right? Into a world where bitches just sang with birds in the forest and they were barefoot and they had like 7 small friends that would help them with shit. That sounds like a pretty sick fantasy to me. And then they were like, no, what if she dreamt of employment and responsibility? I got handed that shit for free. I didn't ask to be here. Let me go sing barefoot in the woods. The film objectively lacks Disney magic, and that's the important thing. Disney has to sell you that magic, and over time they have lost that magic because they've leaned into modern ideas, agendas, messaging, political leanings, what have you. They no longer sell you a story and magic, instead they sell you an agenda and their own messages. Their movies are no longer meant as an escape, but rather as a lesson that they seek to teach however they seek to teach it. And to be completely honest, I think most of us, regardless of what side of the political aisle you happen to be on, are sick of politics being everywhere. Some of us really do just need an escape, a game to play, a movie to watch, a show to experience, something that isn't what is happening all around us at any given time, which is exhausting and frightening and bothersome. Most of us just need a break, and unfortunately that movie was none of that. You can watch my review if you really need details, but the songs were poorly written, the story was half-assed, it was nothing like the original. It was Snow White in name only. And so the problem with that, when you look at the fact that immediately after Snow White fails, they go, "F it, Tangled is gone. We're not doing Tangled anymore." You have to wonder what they were doing with that script, right? You have to ask yourself, what were the casting choices when it came to the stars for Rapunzel and Flynn Rider? You have to ask yourself what they were doing with the story, because if you watch the original Tangled, a big part of it is Flynn Rider learning to be a hero for Rapunzel, and yes, they spend time saving each other, but there's also very much this love story. It's romantic, it's cute. It's a cute movie, and Disney no longer understands cute things. They understand girl boss and nonsense, and they no longer buy into romance and cuteness for the sake of being cute. Tangled being shelved indefinitely, in my opinion, is pretty much a sign that Disney is finally learning a lesson. They've been trying this live action thing for a long time, and like I said, a lot of them have made pretty good money, but the fact of the matter is that they have to look at it from an objective standpoint and ask themselves, how much of the story are we sacrificing when we move into this live action thing? Are we making a reimagining with modern messaging, or are we just turning this into live action? Quite frankly, I'm of the opinion that making live action films is a huge mistake when all you're doing is translating beautiful animated projects into live action. They're never as cute, they're never as fun. I think that's evidenced enough by the Lilo and Stitch trailer. I'm not even gonna get into that because that could be a whole video in and of itself. But the point is that some of these live action remakes still manage to hold onto that Disney magic, and Snow White didn't. A lot of these things just don't work. And so when they're already kind of up creek without a paddle, and then you make a story where Snow White just happens to be good at everything and she's that obnoxious, and it's also coupled with a star that is not entirely likable outside when she's doing press about the film, well, you end up with a real mess on your hands. And I feel like Disney finally looked at that whole fiasco after they decided not to just Batgirl it for a tax break. The Mirror has finally revealed the answer that the fairest one of all is not a girl boss live action remake, rather a film made with love and heart and talent and that Disney magic, that intangible thing that, regardless of what our current opinions on Disney are, Disney has had a certain je ne sais quoi that has basically kept them in business and kept them at the top of the entertainment food chain, especially when it comes to kids, for years. Unfortunately, it seems they're losing that, but I think that Snow White failing so royally is maybe the first step they needed to get back to basics and really reevaluate where they're going. This might just be one of those classic tales where voting with your wallets actually works, because if we could manage to show Disney that we were not gonna buy into the bullshit girl boss Snow White, then maybe we've also shown them that whatever they were cooking up with the Tangled remake was not going to work. Either way, we'll see. We still have a lot of live action Disney stuff coming up soon. We'll be seeing the live action Lilo and Stitch remake in the summer of this year. We'll be getting a live action Moana remake next year. Hercules, Robin Hood, the Aristocats, and Bambi are all also slated to be made in the next coming years, so there's no way this live action remake train is set to stop, but at the very least, I think what happened with Snow White is going to lead not to a cessation of these live action remake productions, but it'll definitely lead to a shifting of tracks, so to speak, where Disney really reevaluates their techniques when it comes to storytelling in a live action format. And that's all from me. I've been SnarkyJay. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. For more SnarkyJay, be sure to check me out on Instagram, and if you'd like to support me, this channel, and my content creation, do check out and consider subscribing to my Patreon for exclusive photo shoot sets and cosplay content. I'll add links to all of those in the description below, and let me know your thoughts on Disney quietly killing off this live action remake of Tangled in the comments below.